This is John with the latest on the NFL NFC playoff race heading into Week 15. Let's begin with a couple of the big winners from Week 14. The Minnesota Vikings somehow found 3 points in their game against the Raiders, and that was good enough to stay just barely ahead of a crowd at 6-7. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers returned from Davy Jones' locker to revive their playoff hopes through the Who Wants It charity program of the NFC South with their gutsy victory over the Falcons. That Buccaneers win means once again I can take great delight on behalf of the fantasy football community to welcome back Arthur Smith to the losers list, as they have lost control over their own destiny. And the Seahawks now find themselves at the tail end of a 6-7 club as far as percentages go. Fourth straight loss and the fourth straight time on the losers list. Now for the win numbers from the computer in its weekly search. First, minimum number of wins needed for any chance. The 49ers are already in the playoff as they would win enough tiebreakers if there was a jamboree at 10-7. The Cowboys, Eagles, Lions, and Vikings could, in theory, lose out and still make the playoffs as the minimum number of wins to have any chance remains at 7. As for wins that would assure a team of a playoff spot, the computer says if either the Buccaneers, Saints, or Packers win out to get to 10 wins, they would make the playoffs. Otherwise, 11 wins would avoid any wacky scenarios leaving a team out. And there's only 4 teams that can achieve that. Cowboys, Eagles, Lions, and Vikings. That means the rest of the teams, Falcons, Bears, Giants, Commanders, Rams, Cardinals, and Seahawks, do not control their own destiny. Interestingly, the Packers rejuvenated the ability to control their own destiny, even though they lost, as other things broke their way. The Vikings and Saints once again control their own destiny with their wins and other things falling into place. And as mentioned, the Falcons lost this power. They could, in theory, win out and not make the playoffs now. As usual, this power can come back once lost with things playing out favorably for a team. Now for the important number. Wins for a realistic chance at a playoff spot, aka wild card. And that number fell for the week now down to just a hair under 9, as in 9 wins is now looking fairly safe, with 8 not being far-fetched for sneaking in. Incidentally, the wildcard number is now fractionally higher than what the computer says will win the NFC South. As usual, I'll be sharing TeamRankings.com projections, and for what it's worth, they do have it as a big party of 8 and 9 teams battling for the last spot in their projections. Thanks to them as always. Going through the teams, starting with the NFC East, 2-team race, and there's a new sheriff in town. Cowboys and Eagles at 10-3. It's anyone's guess now who wins it. Computer says 12-13 is the likely number to take it, but we're getting close to the end of the season, so it's almost just what will be, will be. Team Rankings has it projected to end with both of them at 13-4. In that case, it would depend on how they both got to that point for the tiebreakers. Cowboys take over first place with a total and complete victory over their rivals. At 10-3 with a 58% chance to win the division now and playoff odds close to 100%. They are, of course, on my realistically in list. Still have 3 more tests upcoming. Bills this week, then the Dolphins and Lions, but they very likely could lose out and still make it. One oddity, although they are currently in first place in the division by tiebreaker, they actually do not control their own destiny to win the division. They could win out, and if the Eagles win out as well, the Eagles would end up winning the tiebreaker. The Eagles' talons have lost some sharpness over the last couple of weeks. Still 10-3, still good conference record, still on my realistically in list. 42% end up winning the East, close to 100 to make the playoffs. Play the Seahawks this week and then some warm-up for the playoff games against the Giants and Cardinals. Giants have won 3 in a row, but are still 5-8. Imagine if they had just pulled one out earlier in the season. I still have them in my realistically out column. Have to play the Eagles twice still, but their odds have been creeping up to double digits, so maybe there is still a chance. But a team that does not have a chance is the Commanders, as they could be officially eliminated this week. In the NFC North, just when it looked like the Lions had wrapped up the division, now a 2-game lead over the Vikings, but those teams have yet to play each other. Computer projections have 10 to 11 wins being good enough to take it. Team rankings has them maintaining their lead, with the Vikings eking out a wild card berth and the Packers being part of an 8-9 crowd tying for the last spot in their projections. Lions now 9-4 after being upset by the Bears. Still have a 78% chance of winning the division and 97% for a playoff. So still on my realistically in list, although I am trying to see if the permanent marker can be washed off if they lose a couple more. Play the Broncos this week, which won't be easy. Then the finish of Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings. Probably need to find one victory in there for insurance, although fortunately for them, the wild card field isn't lighting the world on fire to match their 9 wins. Vikings snuck out of Las Vegas up $3 at the slots. Just a huge win to keep them slightly above the chasers. Solidly in contention, 76% chance to make the playoffs and still an outside chance of taking the division. In case a second team from the NFC South ends up in wildcard contention, they do have head-to-head wins over 2 of them, the Falcons and Saints, but a loss to the Buccaneers that might come into play. Bengals this week, and then the NFC North finish of Lions, Packers, Lions. Going to be interesting. Packers came into Week 14 riding high, and so of course they lost to the Giants. In contention, 34% chance to make the playoffs. Have some potentially vital head-to-head wins over the Saints and Rams with a loss to the Falcons. We're going back to the 1990s and renewing the Packers-Buccaneers rivalry this week. Huge game for both. Packers have that Vikings-Bears finish, which won't be a cakewalk. As mentioned earlier, they regain control of their destiny, so if they win out, they are in no matter what. Bears, even with the win over the Lions, are still at 5-8. Another one of those. Imagine if they had just pulled off something like the first game with the Lions. And just too many teams to get by to be anything but realistically out. Although not the most terrible of schedules to miracle win out. Again, looking for the permanent marker remover to have on hand. Well, we've got a good old-fashioned hootenanny here in the South between 3, 6, and 7 teams. It's the Buccaneers' turn to be in first, and that is an insult to first-place teams everywhere. It's anyone's division to win, and they all have 2 more division games to play. Projection is for somewhere around 8 to 9 wins to be good enough to win the division. Team rankings has them all staying joined at the hip and ending up at 8 and 9, tying for both the division and last wildcard spot. Now hear me out. What if somehow 3 teams from the South go to the playoffs? That would define this year in the NFL. Buccaneers with that big win over Arthur to take quote-unquote command of the division. 3-1 division record, but just 5-4 in conference play. Actually now 5-4 in the conference ain't that bad. Are the one NFC South team to hold the tiebreaker over the Vikings if we have 2 South teams try to dance. In contention, 40% chance to win the division now, and about 50-50 to make the playoffs. At 6 and 7, they control their own destiny. Every game big from here on out, starting with the Packers. Falcons now at 6 and 7 after that loss. Also 3-1 division record, but not a great conference record. Do have a win over the Packers, but a loss to the Vikings that might come into play in a wild card battle. But the odds say that if any of these teams go on a winning streak, they will just win the division. In contention, 1-3 to win the division and 40% to make the playoffs. Get right game against the Panthers, although this division could come down to the Panthers being the spoiler for somebody. Saints got their get right win over the Panthers to stay in it. Just 2-2 in the division, and the worst conference record of the bunch equals 33% chance to make the playoffs. And they are one on the wrong end of some head-to-head tiebreakers that might come into play later with losses to the Vikings and Packers, and need to avenge losses to the Buccaneers and Falcons or lose the head-to-head to those two as well. Still 1-4 to sneak away with the division, in contention. Got a good chance to keep it going against the Giants, although the Packers said that last week. Panthers eliminated, spoiler roll activated, and for this week against the Falcons, I proudly say, go Panthers. Out west, 49ers, I think I'm safe in saying they could win the division with me calling their plays. As the computer says, they've already done enough to be good enough. Team rankings has them ending up with 13 wins, and the Rams and Seahawks joining the 8-9 club, tying for the last wildcard spot. 49ers took care of business against the Seahawks, and with the Packers loss, they have clinched a playoff spot. Cardinals this week with the chance to secure the division as well. Rams blew their chance of a heartbreaker loss against the Ravens. Do own the tiebreaker over the Seahawks, but just a 4-4 conference record and a loss against the Packers. Barely in contention with now just a 1-4 chance. Get their own get-right game against the Commanders, then Saints and Giants. So a 9-8 finish is certainly possible, which should be good enough. Seahawks wings have officially fallen off. Now 6-7, and they get an angry Eagles team next. In contention status is on shaky ground in the middle of an earthquake, down to 24% chances. They own 0 relevant tiebreakers. After the Eagles, they do have a chance with the Titans, Steelers, and Cardinals to finish, so not counting them completely out yet. The Cardinals at 3-10 are realistically out, and that is about to be official this week without a lottery-like sequence of events. Recapping my own analysis, 49ers officially in and Panthers eliminated. 10 wins should be reasonably safe, so I have 3 teams in my realistically in column that either are already at 10 wins or 1 away. In the case of the Lions, 8 wins looks like it is in the realm of possibility to sneak in if some things break a certain way. I have 4 teams that either cannot get there or it is outside of normal expectations. Obviously, things can change quickly, but for now, that would leave 7 teams fighting for 3 remaining spots. For Week 15, the 49ers are already in the playoffs. They can claim the division with a win or a Rams loss. The Cowboys clinch a playoff spot with a win or losses by the Rams and Seahawks, or there are several more complicated scenarios involving combinations of losses by the Vikings, Falcons, Buccaneers, Seahawks, Packers, and or even the Cardinals, with some requiring a Lions win. The Eagles have a similar story, winning in, or certain combinations, the simplest being combinations of losses between the Vikings, Falcons, Rams, Buccaneers, and Packers, with the more complicated one similar to the Cowboys as well. The Lions clinch a playoff spot with a win and combination of losses by Vikings and Seahawks, Packers and Seahawks, Rams and Seahawks, or a couple more complicated ones. The Cardinals are eliminated with a loss or Vikings and Rams wins, or Packers and Rams wins, or many, many other possible scenarios happening. And finally, a simple one. The Commanders are eliminated with a loss. Next, there are 6 intra-conference games for Week 15. And for the teams in the middle of the fight, that's the Vikings, Seahawks, Falcons, Packers, Rams, Saints, and Buccaneers. Here is what is better for those teams, the non-combatants in each of these. Most hardly need any computer assistance to figure the first one out. Falcons at Panthers. Obviously, all the others and humanity itself are better off with a Panthers win, taking the Falcons out of realistic wildcard contention. The 49ers and Cardinals game outcome does not move the needle for any of the contenders. Commanders at Rams. Everyone else better off with the Rams formally exiting realistic playoff contention. Same with Eagles at Seahawks. Everyone else better off with the Seahawks hitting a 5-game skid. Now this next one surprised me. I had pre-written something before the computer even spit out the results. I thought everyone would be better off with a Giants win, but the computer says technically only the Falcons and Seahawks are better off with that. The others technically are better off with a Saints win. Lastly, the Buccaneers-Packers game. Rams and Seahawks odds are better served with a Bucs win. The Falcons, Saints, and Vikings are better off with a Packers win. That's it for now. My site is playoffcomputer.appspot.com. Comments, questions, suggestions are welcomed. Enjoy your day.